With midterm elections right around the corner, it's important to place in perspective the whole idea of political parties. They've long been such a part of America's political consciousness that little thought is given to what the founders, in their profound understanding of human nature, believed about them. In Federalist Paper number 10, James Madison made it clear that political parties were inherently antithetical to the constitutional principles proposed by the founders and ultimately ratified. He said, "Complaints are everywhere heard that the public good is disregarded in the conflicts of rival parties, and that measures are too often decided not according to the rules of justice and the rights of the minor party, but by the superior force of an interested and overbearing majority. Human passions have divided mankind into parties, inflamed them with mutual animosity, and rendered them much more disposed to vex and oppress each other than to cooperate for their common good." With approval of Congress, and that means both parties, barely above single digits these days, couldn't that just as easily have been written today? The reason Madison dedicated attention to such parties was his understanding that while they're not desirable, they would be inevitable. And it didn't take long for the inevitable to happen. In fact, it was Madison himself who co-founded one of the first political parties shortly after our first presidential election. Multiple parties emerged over the years, but the bifurcation of political parties turned out to be just as inevitable. We have not, in almost 2 centuries, witnessed the rise of any significant third party for more than a single election cycle. So, with the overwhelming majority of voters holding 2 contradictory views, that both parties are unworthy of their support and approval, but that a vote for anyone other than a Republican or a Democrat is a wasted vote, our attention turns to how many voters will actually show up this fall. Presidential elections are giant, sexy, all-consuming spectacles in the media and popular culture. Midterm elections pale in comparison. The popular way we refer to them alone, midterm, gives us some idea of how secondary they seem, described solely in their relationship to the election of the executive. But the Constitution and the men who wrote it saw things differently. The executive is discussed in Article 2, secondary to the people's legislature laid out in Article 1. There was great skepticism about executive authority in the early days of the Republic, animated by revulsion at the idea of a powerful president who they instinctively believed would resemble a king, against whom they had just successfully fought a revolution. Congress has the constitutional authority to hold the executive branch accountable, but has become increasingly timid in asserting it, and that leads to a more powerful president. While it's increasingly obvious that the 2 major parties are failing to represent the interests of the nation, the reverse perception, how Congress responds to the voters, is also critical. If the electorate is perceived by its representatives as checked out, the Congress is going to continue being unresponsive. Only by going to the polls in roughly the same numbers as we do in a presidential election year, no matter our current disdain for the legislative branch, can the voters demonstrate an understanding that the Congress is intended to most accurately and directly represent their interests. And much like how the Congress must assert its power to hold the executive branch accountable, the people must show up and vote to assert their ultimate power to similarly hold its representatives accountable.